Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I'm Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Cursed, Season 1, Episode 1. It's called Nimue. So full spoilers. Well, actually, no, it's Episode 1. It's Episode 1. We start spoiler free in Episode 1s. Because most of the episodes we do are not Episode 1, so it's a fair mistake to make and just going to autopilot. But we also are spoiler free. It is a new Netflix series that just launched today at the time of recording, and it is a fantasy show set in the world of King Arthur, starring that one from 13 Reasons Why, Catherine Langford is her name.
Yeah.
And but that's, I think, what everyone knows her from, really.
Yeah, I'm sure I've seen her in something else, because I didn't watch that show, and I'm sure I've seen her in something, but I couldn't tell you what.
I mean, I only ever saw the first episode, but I mean, she was all over the posters for it and everything. It was, like...
Yeah.
If I had only seen that episode and never had heard about it ever again, I wouldn't have remembered this was her. I know it's her because the marketing...
Because it got multiple seasons, and it was a thing.
Yeah. And she's like this, chosen one before Arthur is kind of the premise of the show. So that's the basic gist of it. So let's say we'll give you warning somewhere in the middle before we get to spoilers. But yes, so Connor, how did you feel about episode 1 of Cursed?
Well, I mean, it's terrible. Let's not be around the bush. It's absolutely terrible. And I say this as like 3 minutes into this, I was like, yeah, this is bad, and I knew Pete was going to hate this, but there was a chance that, okay, maybe I would be a bit more, given that I tend to be a sucker for, Arthurian shit.
I think my answer might surprise you. I don't know if you've predicted this correctly. See, I went into this and I was thinking, could this save the name Cursed? Because the previous thing called Cursed, of course, is the Wes Craven werewolf movie from 2005, starring Joshua Jackson and Christina Ricci, Ricci. I suppose this is her name. Christina Ricci.
She doesn't come up that often.
It's been a while, yeah. She's not exactly been in the limelight for a while. I don't know what happened. I mean, probably given her age, she probably became a mom and Hollywood took a back seat to her personal life. Because if you think about it, she was kind of a working actress until her early mid-30s, something like that.
Sure, yeah.
So that's the reason. I don't know. But anyway, that film was butchered. People have been saying release the Craven cut because it was. But to be fair, in this case, it's actually there was a cut before he was told to reshoot half of it. So unlike some of the other jokey things that have come out since the Snyder cut, that one actually has a bit more. Oh, it would actually be quite interesting to see what that original cut is, because half the movie was different.
So it's that and whichever Batman one.
Forever, yeah.
Forever.
The Schumacher cut, yes. Right. So
what a world we live in.
So I'm 10 minutes at this. I'm thinking, maybe this will, rescue the word cursed, right? It'll give cursed something to be honoured by, and people can think of that word and not think of trash.
Did it just give a new definition to the trash?
I think I might like the Wes Craven movie better, if I'm honest. I knew within 30 seconds that I hated this.
I knew within the first 3 minutes at best.
I was giving it a chance though, but I mean, but here's the thing: there's two levels to this. Within 30 seconds, I knew it was aggressively not for me, and then within about maybe another 5 minutes, I'm like, I think this is actually just objectively terrible, on top of just being something I hate personally.
Yeah, I don't know how much you know about this. I'm pretty sure this is based on a comic. And I believe adapted by the writer. Do you want to know who that writer is?
Oh God, who?
Or at least, maybe he didn't write it, but he was on board with both this, the show and the comic. Frank Miller. Which might explain some of it. I mean, I say, I don't know if he wrote the comic or if he just drew, but he's on board with the Netflix show in some capacity as well. So.
No, so observations is that there's some terrible CG, particularly at the end of the episode. In fact,
that was rough. Those wolves.
Yeah, but not even just that. There's a kind of ending thing they do for style, the final shot, which obviously we won't talk about till spoilers. But I thought that was particularly cringeworthy bad. In a couple of ways.
Honestly, it all looked bad. Like from a set design, costuming, it just didn't gel I felt
No,
like this disconnect with characters against the world.
No, that was something that I immediately. It was this kind of weird thing because very quickly I was like, "Oh, the image quality on this is quite nice," because it's Dolby Vision and whatnot on Netflix.
Sure, yeah.
And I've been kind of up and down with HDR, wondering like what's going on here. I'm basically slowly learning that the content itself can just have good or bad HDR, to the point where sometimes the SDR is better than the HDR if they've made a tits up of the encoding.
Yes, pretty much. It's all down to implementation.
Yeah. And that goes for, movies, games, whatever. Also see Ghost of Tsushima for a poor implementation of HDR.
Oh, really? That's disappointing.
So So my first couple of minutes, I was kind of just watching the image going, oh, this is quite nice and high quality, the 4K, the colours are popping, it's kind of good.
You can tell you've only recently upgraded, and this is new Netflix territory for you.
Although one notable exception to this is that I think the HDR was having one negative effect, is that whenever there was a dark scene, the gradient pixel line in the darkness where the light would sort of like fade into the black, like that pixel line was harsher than normal, because I think the HDR was making it the difference stand out more. So it was like so when there's a character standing or in the water near the start or later on in a cave, I could see this perfect sort of oval around them in pixels.
That's unfortunate.
That's the one downside. Everything else looked fantastic, but where I'm going with this, to actually tie it into the show itself, is that this, along with the design of the costumes and sets, I use loosely because a lot of it is just people in a field, and I think part of the problem is that for a lot of it, it really just looked like people in a field. It looked like actors playing dress up in a field.
Yes. It looked, and this is negative for a TV show, but I don't want this thing too badly. It looks like a stage production.
Yes.
Like with the costuming and the way the people are there, like I felt like I was watching a play, and I like watching plays. I like watching stage productions done as stage productions. I don't want my TV show to feel like a stage production, though.
The only time the visuals felt they had any kind of atmosphere or artistic kind of style was bizarrely in the animated intro and a couple of animated transition sequences.
I kind of hated those, though, as well. Like they felt so jarring to me. I'm
not saying I liked them, but I'm saying it's the only time where it felt like it had some sort of stylistic flair. All the live action stuff, with the exception of maybe one thing towards the end where there was a lot of lightning going off, but that just inherently gives it a lot more stuff happening visually. Whereas so much of the show is people standing around in a field or in the forest, and it's a tricky thing because like so many low budget movies shoot in forests because it's cheap to do. You can just kind of get away with it. I mean, technically you're supposed to get permits for those things, but the chances of anyone coming up and saying, "Hey, can I see your permit?" are so low that you just kind of go with it.
Well, the chances of someone seeing you are low if you just do it in the middle of a forest on a random day.
But usually the way you combat this is in style, it's in how you film things, it's in whatever. And this clearly has money behind it. It didn't necessarily look cheap, which is kind of this weird almost catch-22 in what we're talking about here, is that it didn't look cheap. It looked actually rather high quality. It was just so devoid of any style that it just looked like a play the entire time, and I do say that negatively. And it's not that I think plays look bad. Plays look like plays because they're live and in front of you, because it's people. It's that it doesn't have color correction. It doesn't have a camera that's doing fancy things. It doesn't have editing. These are things that movies and TV have that are supposed to make it more interesting.
I've seen cheap films in a forest. We all have, I'm sure, where the characters feel natural in that environment because of things like color correction and correct costuming. There was this disconnect where I was very aware, like I say, that it's just people in outfits stood in a field or in a forest. There wasn't this blending of environment.
Don't get me wrong. The fields and the forest look great.
Just as soon as you put people in them,
they looked very high quality. Which was almost the other thing that stood out, is that it was so almost nature documentary around the edges, but then in the middle you'd have some actor in a goofy costume. Even the performances, and it's not like there's some good cast members in this. Like Peter Mullen plays the villain. I typically quite like him, but ultimately he's walking around in this goofy red robe, monologuing about evil and whatnot.
Yeah, and it's for just in terms of the budget and in terms of okay, having the characters feel like they belong in the scene. I'm just comparing something that I know is in the same genre. It's also an Arthurian adaptation with a significantly lower budget from quite a few years ago now. I mean, probably close to a decade. The Merlin from BBC. I don't know if you ever saw any of this, Pete.
No.
No, I don't know if you just caught any of it at all, but it was it's people in the same style of costumes, right? In terms of they're fit in the time period, and the fantastical elements of it, but they don't feel out of place in their environment, and that's the real problem. You've just got to make me believe that they are where they are, and not just people in costumes.
It was well. The other thing is even props. So there's a scene where when they introduce Merlin, he takes like a swig of a drink out of a goblet, and even the goblet to me looked like this fake thing that didn't feel like it was really from a past time. It looked like a prop on a film set, and
yeah.
And I think a lot of this is ingrading. A lot of this isn't just lack of style. Everything's just shot. It's very plain looking.
And
don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. It's vibrant. I'm not saying the quality of things is bad. There's just a lack of style to make anything actually gel. It's I don't know.
We've not really encountered anything like this in a Netflix show, I don't think, to date.
And don't get me wrong, I actually have this problem with a lot of fantasy set stuff. This is by far the worst example of it I've seen. But even in examples that would work for Connor don't work for me. Even when I see Lord of the Rings, there's a disconnect for me where I'm looking at it and going, this feels a bit like there's something about fantasy style costumes to me that just feel inherently a little bit silly.
No, that's fair. There's a level of silly and goofy that I can accept, and I think for me it is about it feeling cohesive with the environment, and like Lord of the Rings. I know you're not a big fan, but you would at least agree that it feels like a cohesive world. And this, I think, the problem is that it doesn't. It feels like people dressing up, and like I say, the props feel cheap. They feel plastic instead of whatever they're supposed to be. The environments don't match up with the people, and that's where it's this not a cohesive world. Where
in fact,
it forces the awareness.
On the note of sound feel like plastic, going back to that goblet moment, I particularly noted the sound effect was like the sound effect was trying to convince you it was this heavier.
But there was no
thing.
heft in the object from where the actor's using it.
No, again there was a bit of a disconnect there. So. Yeah, that was it. The actual plot is just kind of whatever. The main character's a witch. No one likes her. She wants to run away. There's these red robe, magic Gestapo. They don't like magic users. Going around burning villages of people. The Fae is what they're called. And I mean, I was a little confused why at the start she's kind of her own people kind of do a little ritual and it decides that she's kind of a chosen one. I almost felt like that was almost redundant by the end of the episode because ultimately she's kind of sort of the plot thrusts her into that position anyway. Didn't necessarily need this actual choice. I also, and speaking of things that it didn't need, it introduced Merlin twice, which I thought was really weird. Like after his first scene, which wasn't that good, they immediately did another scene which served to introduce him completely, as if you'd never seen him before.
Yeah, that's true. It's bizarre.
There was a lot of things like that. So, first of all, at the 55 minutes or whatever it was, it could have easily done with being cut like another 10-15 minutes out of it.
This could have been a standard, 40-minute network thing.
Yeah.
Just fine.
So, that would be the first thing I say. The performances, they range a little bit. There's this thing a lot of fantasy stuff will do, where they'll have a lot of British actors, and there is this thing where I'm thinking especially the scene with the Merlin in the tavern, and there's these two guys like sort of railing him up. There's a lot of like they're trying to make it sound old school by having British actors, but the British actors aren't actually speaking in really that much of an old school way. So it's another disconnect where I just hear, not quite Cockney, but
honestly, the accents aren't my biggest problem. It was just that almost every actor, even ones that where I'm sure they like that I don't think they're necessarily bad actors. I'm sure they've been in other stuff that they're better than this. Pretty much everyone across the board felt wooden.
I mean, that could largely
but
be out of direction. It could be, again, a lack of style, lack of vision for what this is supposed to be.
yeah, they just felt like no one really had any flow in their performance. Like no one, even people who I've seen in other things. So I'm assuming that is poor direction.
Yeah. Everything felt kind of forced. I mean, because the entire structure of this episode is basically that Nimue basically feeling ostracized anyway, which I didn't necessarily understand that much because the entire community of these people are all Fae. I guess she's just more powerful, therefore they call her a witch.
I don't know if they are all. I don't know.
There's enough. Her mother and those other people doing the ritual were definitely
They are. Yeah, maybe she is more powerful. Like say, I don't know.
Because they all had the green poison ivy lines at the side of their faces when they were doing the ritual.
They did, yeah.
But of course, there's entire groups of just normal humans, and that's kind of where they run off to. I don't think it's a spoiler to say in this first episode she meets Arthur, and there's a bit of a flirtation there. Finds out about these awful red cloaked people, and basically becomes concerned that maybe they're going after her own village, and that's kind of the just the most of the episode without getting into spoilers of where it goes in the end. But every single step along the way, I could feel it trying to do something. Like I could feel it trying to make me endear to her as kind of this runaway. Make me try and care about the chemistry between her and Arthur. Make me care about her sort of rebellious attitude, the way she sort of challenges any sort of thug or anyone she comes across. Make you try to care about her little brother, or at least the kid she knows. I don't know if it was actually a little brother.
I don't think so.
Yeah. And every step across the way, I felt the tropes coming from other things, and it just kind of trying to like shoehorn it into it without ever. I never felt like a natural progression from one decision to the next, where one drove the next thing. It just kind of felt like now's the time to do this part of the trope. Now's the time to do this part of the trope.
One of the most obvious and frustrating parts of this series of events for me was she's after the ritual, she's like, right, I'm running away, I'm leaving, I can't take it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, right, there's a boat going next week. I'll go get on the ship. And she goes down there, and the ship's already gone. It's left early. And it's like, not going to be there for 6 months. It's just like, oh, well then. I guess I'm staying. Next part. and I really just felt like, well, that was nothing. That accomplished nothing.
It basically... It feels like it's just there to justify why she left for a little while. And it's one of these things where it's kind of hard to put into words sometimes, when a beat in a story feels like the plot device that it is rather than being a natural thing. Because there's definitely other better stories, better episodes, better movies, whatever it is, where you can essentially boil everything down to just the plot function that each thing is. But you're not actually noticing it or feeling it as you're watching it, because everything kind of flows naturally from one to the next.
But I think there's better ways to do, because this event here at the dock is then eventually leads to, okay, she ends up running into Arthur from there. There's an easy way of doing it, rather than her, right, I'm leaving for good, I'm going to go to the ship, just go, right, I need to go, I'm going to the town, I need to clear my head, I need to get away from the village of people and see something, someone else, get some other perspective. It doesn't have to be this permanent thing, I'm running away for good, to then immediately just go back on that within the next scene. It's, and then I wouldn't be complaining about it as much, because I'm like, okay, that's fine, your character's still getting that development as much as it is here. And I'm not just feeling like, okay, it's just for this reason.
Yeah, so I'm just going to give the spoiler warning right here. So, full spoilers for episode 1 of Cursed. You've been warned. So, the big thing with her is that when she does get back to the village, the red cloaks are already terrorizing everyone. There's people burning on crosses. There's, fighting going on left and right. Even this had disconnect for me, where the way she was kind of running around, and some people were in the middle of fights, and there was a lot of red cloaks just kind of like moving around as if they were doing something. I don't know. It felt, it's especially the one that really bothered me is she's hiding under a thing, and she runs into the kid that we met earlier, who I definitely did not like his acting for the record. He's only in 2 scenes, but he was terrible. But she's like, hey, run to that spot, run like the foxes, and he runs off, and as soon as he runs away, she sort of makes a run for it because she's trying to find her mother, and there's this red cloak who runs in and grabs her, and it felt like he was just, I could almost see him in the corner waiting for her to move, like you could almost like an actor waiting for his cue to just run out and grab her. It really took me out of the moment, where I'm like, he's just waiting to run in, like don't show me
coming from off stage.
Yeah, don't show me the wires like this. Like, just have him stand further back so he runs out of, from off camera. But I could kind of see him almost just waiting for her, like he knew she was there the whole time. And if so, why not just run up and grab her when she's on the thing?
Yeah, and honestly, what I think is arguably a bigger concern for me with this section of the episode is, why should I give a shit? All of these people were terrible to her. She hated them all and wanted to leave anyway.
Mm-hmm.
How is this motivation now? Like, I mean, it's this is the problem with making her want to just leave and run away, and spending the entire first half of the episode telling us these people are all terrible, because there's no sympathy here from us when they're all being butchered, and her having this kind of harsh reality of like, I cared all along. Like it has no weight to it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like the scene that much, but there was actually more sympathy for the unknown town that was like, when they introduced the Red Cloaks earlier, and Peter Mullen's sitting talking to this ginger kid, and you think that he knows this kid or whatever, but eventually it turns out this is just a kid that they've got from this town that they're already burning because the camera spins around, and like they're terrorizing this town the same way that they do later.
It was one of the better scenes in the episode, I would say.
Yeah, probably because Peter Mullen is one of the better actors on the show, probably. Plus the idea that it sort of revealed something on camera was probably stylistically the most thing the camera did all episode.
I think it was a reasonably effective moment in its own right of just, oh shit, no, everything's burning. And it looked pretty solid. That sequence in its own right, that looked fine.
Yeah, I mean,
it was one of the better moments. It wasn't like, oh, this is amazing or anything like that, but in the comparison that we're at here.
His monologue still went on too long, though. His monologue about doing God's will and all that bollocks still went too long. So she does find her mother. Her mother basically sacrifices herself to save her and says, you have to get this to Marilyn. Get this to Marilyn. And it's worth mentioning, up until this point, there's been no indication that anyone here knows Marilyn. Marilyn's been a separate plot in the capital with the king and all that. And it does, obviously, you kind of immediately go, it looks like it might be a sword in that
I wonder what it could be, especially if you know who Nimue is.
I don't, but
she's the lady in the lake.
Ah, okay. Well, I mean, given that the show starts with the image of her in the water, I mean, I guess maybe I could have pieced that together. But she runs away and wolves start chasing, and the CG on these wolves is
atrocious,
absolute garbage. And she's on this rock. And I mean, I almost smirked a little bit when she almost gets the sword stuck in the stone for a little
I groaned because I was like, oh god, this whole show is going to be moments, isn't it? Of, hey, you recognize this?
I mean, I will see this one. I'll give a pass on its own in a vacuum, because assuming they don't do it again or anything like this again, I appreciate the humor of almost accidentally getting the famous sword in the stone stuck in a random stone before it's supposed to be stuck in a stone. Like, I don't know, there's at least a little bit of like a meta joke there for me.
Sure.
But she's swiping, and it looks really bad as she's swiping at the wheels. She ends up sort of getting knocked down. And the final shot, and what I hate more than bad CG animals is CG blood. And as someone who watches a lot of horror movies, and whenever they take this shortcut because they don't want to have a messy set of using CG blood, I hate it. And they have this effect at the end of the episode where she's slashing at the wolves and there's like CG blood hitting the camera, and it covers it up. It keeps going until there's more and more red, and then it covers up the whole screen, and then that's the credits roll, and it looks so cartoony.
What I hate about CG blood especially is practical blood has been done for decades and looks good. Like it's not like a really expensive effect that you can only achieve it with CG.
No, but I'm going beyond that though. Forget the CG blood on its own. I'm talking about the cartoony ending of having blood fill up the screen,
splash it onto the camera. It's terrible. It's
a separate issue from the CG blood on its own, where it becomes just this really cheesy thing with it that feels out of tone with the rest of the episode. Like, I feel like the rest of the episode is trying to be relatively not grounded, but serious. It's taking itself seriously. Yeah. The fact that we have a scene where Merlin's like lying on the floor naked with his ass on show, and there's like the sword is like burned into his side when when Nimue is using it and waving it around.
I think even just to say, we're supposed to take these red cloaks burning down villages, quite horrifically. We're supposed to take that seriously, and it's presented in a horrific fashion. And then you're just going to do cheesy blood splatter on the camera.
Yeah, it felt wrong. In fact, we even glossed over the part where she actually, when she gets grabbed by that one dude I complained about, she does actually get taken to the leader, and they're going to burn her. She's like, oh, she's a powerful witch. Look at the eye. She's a witch. And she only gets saved because there's a bunch of arrows arrows coming.
Yeah.
Sometimes, see, when I was playing Last of Us 2, I kept calling the arrows a bow. I kept saying, oh, I fired a bow. And
What's wrong with you?
I've been conscious ever since that I'm mixing arrows and bows up. But
you should be.
But it's kind of, and I thought they were going to reveal who was firing the arrows a minute later, but they didn't. It just felt like there's such a thing where we want a tense moment where she's almost going to be killed, but then she just runs away, and it's fine. It's whatever.
Yeah,
in fact, actually, she gets a run, Barry, run. Her mother says, "Run, Nimue, run."
She does, yeah.
I laughed out loud.
Me too. I completely forgot because of how terrible other things are.
Run, Nimue, run. And Merlin otherwise is supposed to cure the drought, and he's trying to set this other dude in lightning, but the other dude sort of pieces out and says, no, you know what, this is too dangerous.
Yeah, and then it's like, fine, you want rain, here's blood rain.
Yeah, the king's not pleased. He's not pleased that the rain to end the drought finally came, and oh shit, it's blood, so he's upset. That
would be too.
Yeah, Merlin's stuff was kind of annoying to me for the most part. They were going for this sort of drunken, almost Jack Sparrow kind of vibe.
Yeah, it's a very young take on Merlin.
Yeah, the young and sexy Merlin. In fact, the fact that they wanted Merlin to be kind of young and sexy tells me all I need to know about this show. And that
does tell you a lot about the target audience, doesn't it?
Yeah, it lets me know that I never need to even think about it again. And this is the last I will ever speak of this shit show. Not a shit show, a shit show. There's a difference.
Really emphasize that pause.
Yes. So, it's basically shite, and there's basically nothing I like about it. Oh, and the fact that the image quality was quite good. That couldn't keep it interesting for long though. By the time I got to the 5-minute mark, I was like, oh my god, how much longer is left of this? Can we wrap this up?
Like I say, you can really tell you're new to Netflix's 4K content.
Well, this is the thing. I watched the Old Guard the other day, and I thought the HDR on that was mediocre. Like, I didn't.
No, but I just mean even in terms of their TV shows, the 4K quality most times is pretty good. I remember the first time I saw a couple of shows for the first couple of weeks, I'm like, oh, shiny new, but it not lose its appeal. I'll still always choose it if it's available, but more, it's not enough to keep me interested for more than 10 seconds.
No, I mean, because I've watched other things in HDR, and some of them have either been like the different, like, because when I watched the Old Guard, I was like, this looks the same. I don't see anything in this that's different. And then there's other ones where I'm actively like, this actually looks like it's detracting from the image. Like, I think it looks better in SDR. And then some of the stuff just doesn't have it. Like, Dark, which we just watched season 3 of. That didn't have HDR. It was just 4K. Which I still appreciate. And mainly just for the bitrate bump more than anything else, because I will go on record as saying that 4K streaming is only almost as good as 1080p Blu-ray, because the bitrate is more important than the pixel count. I'm putting it out there once you're at a certain point. But this is not a technical podcast.
Nope, not at all. We never talk about technical elements. I'm just more interested in talking about this than I am the show, because it's terrible and I hate it. It's a really bad show, and I almost was like, Pete, we don't have to do this. You don't need to sit through this. I thought about being nice, and I was like, no, you prick. You can suffer. You prick. Suffer. I hate it. All right. So yeah, don't watch it. Don't watch it. that is the best advice we can give. Yes. So thank you very much for joining us. You can let us know what you think of the show in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. Like is very important. Lets YouTube know that we're worth recommending out and more people will find us. You can support us financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your trouble and keep all the content coming. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you once again for watching and listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla? That feels like a spiritual successor to Siren.